I did not come to the US with the intention of breaking the law. I was not smuggling anything, not dodging big taxes, not involved in any shady activity. I was just living a very normal life. But then I realized something strange. In America, normal is not always safe. There are things you do every day without thinking, without bad intentions, sometimes even very reasonably, and somehow they still brush up against the law, a regulation, or some invisible social boundary. The 31 stories that follow are not big cases. No one gets arrested. There is no crime movie. Climax. They are just very small moments. An emoji, a pile of fire, a mushroom, a mispronounced word. But those small moments taught me a big lesson in America. The problem is not whether you have bad intentions, it is whether you understand the system. These are 31 times I accidentally stepped over that line. Not on purpose, not prepared, and usually only after everything had already happened. Story 1. Getting fined for being too polite. I always thought politeness was completely safe, like bubble wrap for social interactions. Smile, pause, let others go first. What could possibly be wrong? Turns out a lot. One morning, I was walking on a fairly crowded sidewalk. I noticed someone who looked like they were about to cross my path, so I politely stopped. They stopped too. We looked at each other and smiled. I gestured for them to go first. They politely gestured back, and just like that we stood there frozen, like two people competing to see who could be more polite. Behind us, the crowd started to pile up. There were irritated sighs. Someone muttered something like, "Just go already," then a voice cut in. "You cannot stop here. I was not causing trouble. I was not breaking traffic rules. I was just being too polite." And in America, apparently being overly polite can count as doing something wrong. Lesson learned, politeness is good, but moving with the flow matters more. Story 2. Crossing the street legally but still getting warned. I always believed that following the rules would keep me safe, especially when crossing the street. Red light stop, green light, go simple civilized. No need to think too much until the day I crossed the street in America. The pedestrian light turned green. I stepped off the curb with the confidence of a model citizen. I walked in the crosswalk at the right pace, doing everything the rulebook ever taught me. But halfway across the street, cars making right turns started lining up, stopping and staring at me with very annoyed looks. One driver rolled down the window and called out, "Can you walk faster?" I froze. I was crossing legally. The light was still green, but clearly in this traffic context, I was slowing down an entire line of cars simply by being too correct. In that moment, I understood something important. The written law gives you the right to go, but the lived law decides how you should go. In America, following the law is not enough. You also have to move at the right rhythm. Story 3. Asking for help and accidentally breaking a rule. I used to think that when you run into trouble, the simplest thing is to ask the people around you, humans helping humans. What could be complicated about that? One time I was struggling with a vending machine I put my money in. The machine made a very confident noise and then nothing. No drink, no snack. Just me and disappointment. I stared at the machine like it had personally betrayed me. I saw someone walking by and asked very politely, "Can you help me for a moment?" The person stopped, looked at me, looked at the machine, then looked around like they were calculating the legal risk of pressing a button for a stranger. Finally, he shook his head. "Sorry, I am not allowed." That was the moment I understood something. In America, helping in the wrong place can come with responsibility. Public spaces come with rules, and kindness is not always something the system is designed to accept. Story 4. Not lining up, a cultural violation. I grew up in a place where lining up is a very flexible concept. Whoever stands closer basically goes first. No ropes, no markings, no need to think too much. Then I walked into a store in America. There were a few people standing loosely near the counter, no clear sign of a line. By instinct, I stepped into the empty space closest to the counter and stood there naturally. 3 seconds later, I felt something was wrong. No one said anything, but the air behind me got thick. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else checked their watch like they had been personally offended. Finally, a calm voice spoke, "You are standing behind me." I turned around, confused. Turns out there was an invisible line that everyone could see except me. Lesson learned: in America, lining up is not just politeness, it is a cultural law, and the group will remind you of it very quietly. Story 5. Taking a photo in the wrong place. I am the kind of person who sees something beautiful and my hand automatically lifts the phone. No thinking, no permission from the brain. If the light looks good and the angle feels right, I take the shot. It is a reflex, not a decision. That day, I was standing inside a building that looked completely harmless. No warning signs, no barriers. Nothing that suggested taking photos could cause trouble. The light coming down was beautiful, so I pulled out my phone and took one picture. Right after the click, a voice came from behind me. Calm but very firm. "You are not allowed to take photos here." I startled and turned around like I had been caught. Red-handed, I apologized immediately, my phone still in my hand, not even lowered yet. The person explained the security and privacy rules in a tone that made it very clear this was not a joke. In that moment, I understood one simple thing. In America, not everything that looks beautiful is allowed to be kept. Story 6. Joking at the wrong time, I always thought my sense of humor was pretty balanced. Not too much, not too dry. The kind where you say something to lighten the mood and everyone knows it is a joke, until the day I joked at the wrong time. That day I was doing paperwork in a very serious place. The staff member asked routine questions, typing away. The silence was so thick you could hear every keystroke. To ease the tension, I casually made a harmless joke, something like hoping the system does not detect me as an alien. No one laughed. The staff member looked up at me with a completely neutral expression. Then they typed a few more lines, noticeably slower. No explanation, no reaction, just silence. That was when I understood something. In America, not everyone is required to understand that you are joking, and the system definitely is not lesson learned. Humor has boundaries and timing is the fence. Story 7. Parking just 5 minutes. I always believed that just 5 minutes was a harmless unit of time. It sounds very human. Run and grab something, come right back, no harm done. That day I was in a hurry. I saw an empty spot by the road and told myself I will park here for 5 minutes only. Fast like lightning, no need to read the sign, no need to think too much. 5 minutes. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I felt a little uneasy, but I reassured myself, who would ticket someone who only parked for 5 minutes? When I came back, the car was still there. But on the windshield there was an extra small piece of paper, very bright in color, a ticket, no greeting, no explanation. Just a clearly printed fact I had violated the rule. In that moment I understood something very American. Just 5 minutes does not exist in traffic law. Here 5 minutes is still parking, and illegal parking is illegal parking. Story 8. Not reading the signs carefully, I am the kind of person who is very confident in my ability to read the situation. I glance at signs. If nothing looks dangerous, I just do it. Life is like that. You do not always read every small line, until the day I was in a very orderly, very civilized public space. There was a sign right in front of me. The text was not small, but I only read the first half, so I acted based on my assumption very naturally, very confidently. Not long after someone approached me, their tone was polite but firm. "You are doing this against the rules." I pointed at the sign and explained that I thought it was allowed. The person nodded, pointed back at the sign, and pointed exactly at the line I had skipped. In that moment, I understood a very painful truth. In America, I thought so is not a valid reason. The law does not care what you thought. The law only cares whether you read it or not. Story 9. Doing things out of old habit. There are things you do so often you no longer think about them. Your hands move first and your brain follows to justify it. I carried many habits like that with me when I came to America and believed they would adapt. I was wrong one day during a very ordinary moment. I did exactly what I had been doing for years. No bad intention, no rush. Pure instinct. To me, it was polite, convenient, and harmless. But the reactions around me said otherwise. Some people looked at me a little too long. Some frowned, some looked confused, like they were deciding whether to say something. Finally, someone gently told me that here, this behavior was not considered normal. I stood there embarrassed and confused, and that was when I understood. Habit is not carry-on luggage. When you enter a different culture, there are things you are forced to leave behind, even if they once felt completely natural to you. Story 10. Getting warned very gently. The first time I got warned in America was not what I imagined. I thought there would at least be a stern tone or a look that said you are in trouble, but no. Everything happened very gently. That day I made a small mistake, the kind of mistake that elsewhere might be ignored or at most brushed off with a quick verbal reminder. I was in the middle of doing it when someone walked up to me. Their voice was so calm it actually made me more confused. Please remember not to do that next time. That was it. No scolding, no raised voice, no intimidation. The person even gave a small smile and walked away like nothing had happened. I stood there feeling like I had just been spared without knowing what I had almost gotten into. That gentleness was exactly what made my spine go cold, because clearly they did not need to make a big scene for you to understand that you had crossed a line. The lesson was very clear. The law does not need to be harsh to be scary. It only needs to be applied consistently. Story 11. Signing papers without fully understanding. I always thought signing papers was just the final step to get things done. I read the title, skim the first few lines, see familiar words, and sign. The hand moves faster than the brain because there is only one thought in my head. It is probably the same as the last ones. That day, I was doing paperwork in a place that felt very neat, very professional. The staff member handed me a stack of papers, pointed to the signature line, and smiled warmly. I glanced at a few lines, saw long legal language, and decided to trust the smile I signed. The whole thing took less than 10 seconds, but a few weeks later I realized that signature came with things I did not remember, agreeing to responsibilities clauses and a few small obligations, but very real ones. That was when I understood something. In America, a signature is not just a formality, it is a promise written in ink, and ink does not joke. A signature is heavy even when you sign very fast. Story 12. The system does not joke. I have a small habit when working online. If there is an empty field that asks for input, I sometimes fill it in for fun. Nothing important, just a light joke to make dealing with a dry system less boring. One time, while filling out an online form, I reached the additional notes section and typed a very harmless joke. The kind that if you said it to a real person, they would probably just laugh and move on. I hit submit, the screen froze for a few seconds, then an error message appeared, then came an email, then another email. The tone was polite but cold. The system had detected inappropriate information and required full verification again. That was when I realized I had just told a joke to a computer. And computers do not laugh. The lesson was very clear. Machines do not understand context. In America, systems read words, not intentions, and joking in the wrong place, even online, can make things get serious very fast. Story 13. Proving the obvious. There are things I think are so obvious, they should not need proof. My name is my name. I am standing here, I exist. Those things to me feel like universal facts, but the system does not think that way. During one paperwork process, I was asked to provide additional proof for information I had just filled in, just signed to confirm, and just shown documents for. I looked at the request with genuine confusion. This is already obvious, right? Obvious to me, but not enough for the system. So I started printing more papers, taking more photos, uploading more documents, all just to prove something no one in the room doubted except the computer. That was when I understood, in America, truth does not exist without paperwork. What is obvious to you may not be obvious to the system, and the system always needs proof even for the most obvious things. Story 14. Doing everything right and still being wrong. I always thought that as long as I followed the rules, everything would be fine. Rules exist so people can follow them. I read the instructions, completed all the important steps, and felt very confident that this time there was no way I could be wrong. I was wrong because I was too confident. When I submitted the paperwork, I received a gentle headshake along with a polite sentence, "Your application is not complete." I was surprised I had done everything right. I asked what was missing. They pointed to one very small step sitting between two big steps that I had completed perfectly. A step I skipped because I thought it probably was not necessary. It turned out that in this system, there are no optional steps. Missing one step, no matter how small, is enough to stop everything. In that moment, I learned a very American lesson. Good intentions do not save a broken process. Here, the process always matters more than the feeling of, I did it right. Story 15. Everything has a process. I am the kind of person who likes to work fast. If something can be done early, I do it early. In my head, efficiency matters more than order, as long as the task is done right. Not exactly one time I handled a fairly simple task. There were many steps, but I looked at them and decided to optimize time. I did the easy steps first and left the complicated ones for later. I finished quickly and felt pretty proud of myself. Until the system returned the result invalid, I checked again and realized I had not done anything wrong in content, I was wrong in order. One step I did too early, another I did too late. To me, the result was the same, but to the system, it was a completely different story. That was when I understood in America, everything has a process. Fast does not always mean correct, and doing things in the right order matters more than feeling like you are doing well. Story 16. Endless forms, I entered the registration process, feeling very optimistic. In my head, registering meant filling in a name, checking a few boxes, clicking submit, and done. This is modern life after all. Who makes things difficult with paperwork anymore? I was wrong. The first form appeared, I filled it out, then came the second form, then the third. Every time I thought I was almost finished, the system politely informed me there is a little more information needed. The questions started to feel philosophical. Where have I lived in the past 5 years? Have I ever used another name? Am I absolutely sure I am not another version of myself? 15 minutes later, I was no longer tired from typing information. I was tired from having to be patient with myself. There were no errors, no warnings, just persistence. That was when I understood in America, forms are not just for collecting data, they are a mental endurance test, and patience turns out to be a required life skill. Story 17. The system assumes you are wrong. I walked into the check feeling fairly relaxed. I had done nothing wrong, so there was nothing to worry about. In my head, truth was something that would naturally be recognized. Turns out that is not how it works. From the start, I realized I was in the position of needing to explain. The questions were polite, but the looks and tone clearly said, "We do not believe you yet." I started answering, explaining bit by bit, trying to stay calm and cooperative. But the more I explained, the more I understood something. This system does not start from the assumption that you are right. It starts from the assumption that you might be wrong. Every answer needed more proof, every detail had to be verified. Not because I was suspicious, but because that is how the system operates. In that moment, I learned a very practical lesson. In America, silence is not neutral, silence works against you. If you do not prove it, the system will draw its own conclusion for you. Story 18. A small thing, but it goes on record. I used to think some mistakes were too small to be remembered. The kind of minor slip that gets a quick verbal reminder and then everyone moves on. People make mistakes after all. But the system does not think that way. One time I made a very small mistake, no consequences, no harm to anyone. It was even addressed in an extremely gentle tone. I nodded, apologized, and believed that was the end of it. A few months later, during a completely different procedure, I was asked again about that same small mistake. I froze, I had forgotten it long ago. It turned out that while I had moved on with my life, the system had remembered it very clearly. No emotions, no forgetting, just recording and storing. In that moment, I realized something slightly unsettling. Humans forget, but data does not. In America, even small things can go on your record, and records remember for a very long time. Story 19. Technology takes things literally. I always thought modern technology was very smart enough to understand context, emotions, even sarcasm. So when entering information, I sometimes like to play with words a little just to make it less boring. One time while filling out information online, I reached a short description field and typed a very light joke. The kind of joke that if you said it to a real person would probably just get an awkward smile. I hit submit. Feeling relaxed, 3 seconds later the screen showed an error message. The request could not be processed. I tried again, still no. Then an email arrived, very serious, saying my content showed signs of being inappropriate and required further review. That was when I realized I had just joked with an algorithm. And algorithms do not laugh. The lesson was very clear. Technology only understands words, not intention. In America, it is best not to joke with algorithms because they always take things literally. Story 20. Nothing ever disappears. I used to think the internet was like a temporary room. You finish what you need, then close the door, and everything is over. Sent is sent, deleted is gone. That is digital life, fast and clean, until I realized I was way too optimistic. One time I did a very normal online action. I submitted some information, clicked confirm, and forgot about it immediately. There were no warnings, no problems. I felt safe thinking everything had passed. A few months later, in a completely different situation, I was asked again about exactly what I had done that day. the time, the content. Even the version I had deleted, I froze, I had forgotten, but the internet had not. That was when I understood a slightly scary truth. Online, nothing truly disappears in America you can forget, but history does not. The internet is not good at forgiving, but it is very good at remembering. Story 21. A joke that got misunderstood. That day, everything started out fun. The atmosphere was relaxed, people were chatting casually. Nothing suggested that a joke could cause trouble. I felt safe enough to joke around. I said a very normal joke. The kind of social joke that does not attack anyone, does not touch anything sensitive. In my head, it was the kind of line everyone knows is a joke, but the reaction was completely different. No laughter, no awkward smiles, just a silence that lasted longer than normal. One person looked at me seriously, another frowned slightly. The cheerful mood disappeared faster than Wi-Fi in a crowded place. Later, it was explained to me that in this context, what I said was not considered a joke. It was understood in a very serious way. That was when I learned an important lesson. The content of a sentence does not decide everything. Context is what defines it. In America, what you say is not enough. What matters is where and when you say it. Story 22. A harmless habit somewhere else. There are habits you do your whole life without ever thinking they could be a problem. Where you grew up, they are completely normal. No one comments, no one complains, they are even seen as convenient. And then you bring that habit somewhere else. In a very ordinary situation, I did exactly what I had always done. No sneaking, no hiding. Very natural, like breathing. I did not even think I was doing anything at all. Until someone spoke up, their tone was polite, but the message was very clear. What I had just done here was not allowed. I stopped feeling slightly confused and tried to explain that where I come from, this is not wrong at all. The person nodded very understandingly and then said one short sentence. But this is not that place. In that moment, I understood something very practical. Habits do not travel with you forever. In America, geography changes the rules and you have to change with it. Story 23. Natural does not mean free. I always had a very romantic idea about nature. Blue skies, trees, everything belonging to everyone. If something looks nice, you pick it up. If something feels special, you take it home as a souvenir. It is nature after all. Who owns it? Turns out I was wrong in a very American way. During a walk in a national park, I saw a few small nice things along the trail. Nothing rare, just natural objects lying there looking completely ownerless. By instinct, I bent down and picked one up, thinking simply, what harm could it do? Right then a ranger appeared. His voice was calm, polite, but very clear. I was not allowed to take anything out of the area, no matter how small, no matter how natural, no matter if it was just for fun. In that moment, I understood something important. In America, nature does not equal freedom. It is protected, managed, and sometimes it has a clearer owner than people do. Story 24. Allowed does not mean accepted. There is a very confident feeling when you know you are doing something legally right. The kind of confidence where you can say, I checked it, I am not wrong, and that day I was exactly that person. In a very ordinary situation, I did exactly what the law allowed. No loopholes, no cheating. I even double-checked in my head just to be sure everything was valid. But the reactions around me did not match that confidence. Some people looked uncomfortable, some sighed, some moved a little farther away very deliberately. No one said I was wrong because I was not, but clearly I was making people uneasy. That was when I realized something. In America, besides written law, there is also something called soft law. It is not on paper, there is no clear punishment, but everyone understands it. The lesson is simple: being allowed does not mean being accepted, and soft rules can sometimes be stronger than hard ones. Story 25. Meeting a bear in Alabama. I was staying in a cabin surrounded by nature in Alabama, the kind of place where the night is so quiet you can hear your own thoughts. I stepped outside to breathe in the fresh air, completely relaxed, and then I saw a big bear very focused on digging through the trash can. Like it was the most important task of its life. I froze. It froze. We looked at each other, both sharing the same thought. This was not part of the plan. For a few panicked seconds, we moved around each other very close to a position that honestly looked like we were about to wrestle. Right then, someone shouted from far away, "Do not wrestle it. That is illegal here." I was scared and confused. At that moment, this was the last law I ever expected to accidentally break. Eventually, the bear walked away. I stood there catching my breath and learned a very deep lesson. There are some laws you never want to learn about through real life experience. Story 26, Etsy, and an IRS letter. At first, everything was just for fun. I listed a few handmade items on Etsy keychains, handmade cards. If they sold, great, if not, no big deal. In my head, this was a hobby, not a business. The scale was so small that calling it an empire would feel disrespectful to the word. Then one day I got an email. The subject line was very polite, the content was very serious. The sender IRS. My heart skipped a beat. I read it over and over, making sure they had the wrong person. But no, it turned out that as long as there is income, even a small amount, even just selling for fun, the system still considers it something that needs to be recorded. I imagined myself being investigated like a professional tax evader, while my total revenue was not even enough for a decent meal. In that moment, I learned a very practical lesson. In America, small money is still money, and the system does not have a concept of just for fun. Story 27. Pronouncing Arkansas, I stopped my car at a small roadside diner, the kind of friendly local place where everything feels fine until you open your mouth and ask the server, "What is special here in AR, Kansat?" The air in the diner froze, the server paused. Someone turned their head, then another. I felt like I had just mispronounced the name of a very important family member. An older man sitting nearby spoke up. His voice calm but heavy. "Here we call it AR, can." So I smiled awkwardly, apologized, and explained that I did not know. No one got angry, but their looks made one thing clear. There are things you are expected to know. When I repeated it correctly, the atmosphere softened. That was when I understood something. In America, especially for locals, language is not just for communication, it is identity. Mispronouncing is not a crime, but correcting yourself is how you show respect. Story 28. Bomb emoji on Venmo. I paid a friend back after a weekend. BBQ, everything was normal. Enter the amount, add a note for fun. To make it friendlier, I added a bomb emoji, the usual joke meaning money exploded the stomach, completely harmless. I hit send. 2 minutes later, the transaction froze. 10 minutes later, I got an email. The tone was very polite, but the subject made me sweat. Your account has been temporarily restricted due to content that may relate to dangerous activity. I stared at the bomb emoji like it had just betrayed me. I called support and explained it was just a joke. The staff member paused for a second and said, "The system does not understand jokes." 24 hours later, my account was unlocked, but I learned a very expensive lesson. In America, even emojis have consequences, and never joke with the system using pictures. Story 29. Picking mushrooms in a park. I was walking in a national park feeling very relaxed. Fresh air, quiet trails. Everything felt like nature healing mode. Then I saw mushrooms, not rare mushrooms, just a few growing by the path. Looking harmless, even a little pitiful because no one seemed to notice them. In my head, an image popped up immediately. A home-cooked dinner, healthy, budget-friendly. By instinct, I bent down to pick them. Immediately, a very firm voice came from somewhere, "Sir, please step away from the fungi." I jumped, turned around, and saw a ranger walking toward me with a serious expression, like I had just touched a national artifact. He explained that taking anything from the park is prohibited, including mushrooms. In that moment, I understood something very clearly. In America, even wild mushrooms are protected by law, and your dinner plans are not a priority. Story 30. Lighting a beach fire. That evening felt perfect by every movie standard. California beach, light wind, gentle waves. I built a small fire to roast marshmallows for a simple BBQ. The fire was so small, a strong breath could put it out. I felt very confident I was doing the most harmless thing in the world. Until a Jeep showed up. Flashing lights, Beach Patrol logo, clear as day. The feeling was like getting caught smuggling something ridiculous. A beach officer stepped out, looked at the fire, and asked if I had a permit to light it. I looked at the tiny fire and tried to explain, this was just a fun BBQ. He nodded understandingly, then asked me to put it out immediately for safety and environmental reasons. I did. I left the beach with smoke in my clothes and a very clear lesson. In America, nature always comes first, and BBQ is never more important than the environment. Story 31. Founding a backyard nation. That BBQ party was completely normal. Friends gathered. Folding chairs in the yard, burgers sizzling, relaxed weekend vibes. In a moment of excitement, I planted a homemade flag in the corner of the yard and joked, "I hereby declare the backyard republic." People laughed, someone played along, someone wanted honorary citizenship. Everything was fun until the neighbors started paying attention. One person asked very seriously, "What exactly are you declaring?" I laughed and explained it was just a joke, but the look on their face made one thing clear. There are words in America you do not joke about: casually nation declaration, independence. These are not backyard party jokes. The party ended earlier than planned, the backyard republic dissolved quietly. My final lesson is simple. In America, sometimes just living a little differently is already enough trouble. After 31 stories, I realized something rather ironic. In America, you do not need to be a bad person to get into trouble. You just need to be someone who is unfamiliar with the system. The law here is not always loud, it does not always show up with handcuffs or sirens. Sometimes it arrives as an email, a gentle reminder, an uncomfortable look, or a temporarily locked account. But it is exactly that gentleness that makes it serious. Because this system does not run on emotions. It runs on procedures. It does not care whether you are good or bad. It only cares whether you did it correctly. These stories are not meant to criticize America, nor are they meant to scare anyone. Instead, they are a reminder that if you want to live comfortably in any society, you need to understand how that society works. Not just carry your own habits with you, and if there is one final lesson, it is this. In America, sometimes living just a little differently is enough to be misunderstood. The good news is misunderstandings can be learned from, and once you learn, you will find that everything feels much less scary.